my goodness! Holy sh!
Well, folks, today's video, I'd like to share with you my trials and tribulations of trying to diagnose a popping coming from the front end of the billy goat here. A little backstory for those of you that don't know this vehicle, which is probably a lot of you. The billy goat was originally a 67 Bronco years ago, and it just kind of morphed into this. The front axle is a Dana 44 low pinion from a 76 F250 with 4.5-ton outers. When I put this thing back, but not back, when I put this thing together as a off-roading toy, I put a Richmond Gear Lockrite lunchbox locker in the Dana 44. I actually still have the receipt here from 2007. It served us really well. This was primarily my dad's wheeling rig. And yeah, it worked great for years. And then about, I'm gonna say about 2 years ago, maybe, roughly, there was a popping noise coming from the front end. I just assumed it was the locker, and even though it was popping, it still seemed to be functioning fine, or well enough that you didn't really notice a loss in performance. It started getting progressively worse, but it still seemed like it was always pulling. So I think it was last spring, it was getting bad enough that, you know, I decided to go ahead and pull the front end apart, take a look at the locker. That was still my prime suspect at that point, even though sometimes it sounded like it was coming from the wheel ends. And pulled it apart, pulled the case, pulled the locker out of the case. Everything looked good. The specs were good according to the installation manual for the space between the driver gears, or whatever vernacular you want to use. Put it all back together, kept wheeling it. While I had that front end apart, I checked the long field U-joints in this, and they did have a little bit of play in them. Dad wasn't nearly as good about greasing these long fields before every wheeling outing like I am with my big buggy. Got some food in my teeth there. Anyway, yeah, I noticed the slop in the U-joints, and just like, oh well, the noise is just more of an annoyance than anything at this point, so kept on wheeling it. This past spring, I was wheeling this, and my passenger said he could look out there when I had a hard turn to the left, and he could see the U-joint, and it would make that popping noise. The U-joint would kind of shake and whatnot, so that made me believe that maybe the play in the U-joint was causing the U-joint to bind up during cornering or whenever. I mean, it would still pop going straight too, but I just figured, yeah, maybe it's the play in the U-joint causing it to bind up and then release. So I went ahead, I wanted to get more long fields, but since then Longfield has changed their design. I really like the Longfield design, the older one, where you greased each cap of the U-joint. I like knowing that each cap is getting grease. But since then Longfield has changed their design, so I did not get new long fields. I went ahead and got CTMs, because you can grease each cap. And here's some video of the installation of those that I did, probably a couple months ago. I don't know if you can see it. Oh yeah, you gotta be able to see that. There's definitely some slop in them. Okay, I spared you all the anguish of watching me try to get these snap rings out and the U-joints. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, these aftermarket shafts and joints, generally, in my experience, all are set up with a full snap ring in here. They're machined back here a little further, so they take a full snap ring instead of just that little clip that snaps on there. Here's the long field. Hey, I said it right this time. It really doesn't look that bad, but there is some slop in the caps. He said I wouldn't think it'd be enough to cause the horrible clicking and popping and banging, but maybe. The thing that makes, here's the CTM, the thing that makes these aftermarket joints so strong, there's a couple of things. One, these particular ones, the CTMs and long fields, there's no bearings in here or in the cap. It's metal on metal. That's why it's so damn important to keep these things lubed up. But by not having, little roller bearings in there, that allows you to manufacture these with a bigger cross pin for more strength. And the second thing that makes them stronger is, the actual material they're made of. I forget what these old first generation long fields are made of. For some reason I'm thinking they were made of 300M, which is some sort of aircraft alloy. The CTMs, they're made out of 300M. And just like the long fields, they don't have any bearings, roller bearings in there, but it does have a small little bushing in there. So these are rebuildable. And you got you can lube every cap. And definitely you can see the CTM is a way bigger body than the long field. Well, it's in there. Took me a couple hours. It was a real son of a bitch. It kind of goes without saying when you're putting a U-joint in anything, whether it's aftermarket axles or stock stuff or stock U-joints, you should take the time to, once the U-joint's out, to sand all that out, clean everything up. That was what put up such a fight. I ended up getting it pretty much together, but it was all bound up, and I boogered up one of the seals, which hopefully is just a common O-ring that I can get somewhere in my travels tomorrow. But I just had to pull the plug on it and take it all apart, clean everything up, and start over. And it went much better. I should know better by now than to try to throw together rusty parts like that. They never do go together very well. Let's slap her back in the axle. Got there's Steve. Hey buddy, how you doing? Look out. That axle housing is probably full of mud, that tube anyway. I've made this little tool. It's just an old electric fence post with a washer welded on the end of it. Use that to fish mud out of the housing. I got a little bit that time. Yeah, Steve. You're my buddy, ain't you? You're just hungry. You want food. Okay, before I slip this in, let me show you a little trick that I don't know, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's figured this out. I'm pretty sure I figured this out on my own. I didn't copy it from anyone. But you're basically holding on to this axle shaft here to try to get it wrestled into there. What I've found on the Dana 44, a 1/2 inch or a 9/16 socket jammed into there. Now this would be on the bottom side. Well, I can't do this with two hands. Maybe it'll show in the video when I actually put it in there. But, picture that on the bottom, and then gravity will be holding the long end down, and it keeps it captive. It keeps the shaft where it's, I guess, not straight, but for lack of a better word. Also, what you can do for a little more leverage control when you're dealing with a long axle shaft, I'll probably be okay with this one, but like on that big buggy over there, that axle is long and big and heavy. I'll slip a piece of pipe over this for a little more leverage and control. Put the socket in there. The axle kind of closed down on it. See there? It's a little hard to control, but I think I'll manage. Obviously you don't want to scrape the sides of the axle tube and take a bunch of dirt in there, but you're going to get a little bit. Obviously, don't forget, a lot of times when you do this, the socket ends up here inside your knuckle. Don't forget to take it out.
That's a little better fit.
But they're a lot stronger than the newer aluminum. Working on Ford's all on. Don't drop it in the dirt. No, you proved me wrong on this one. A little taffy. All right, it's a couple days later. Managed to find some O-rings. Additionally, found me some metric grease zerts. And more importantly, Kitty's over there enjoying some kibble. That snap ring there, I've got to open it up, move it over the O-ring and onto the cap, even though the snap ring groove isn't showing yet. Otherwise, when I squeeze the caps in more, it's going to become trapped there. It's already got a little bit of pressure on it, but looks like there's just enough room I can get the other one over there too. I can't do it with one hand, so there you go. That one's up, and that one's up. So these are the fittings that come with the U-joints. They're a spring-loaded fitting that takes a needle, and I prefer these. Two reasons. Number one, I just prefer where'd it go? I prefer the normal grease zert fitting. I feel it gives a better seal and it just better chance of actually getting grease forced into the cap. Plus these ones here, because they're spring loaded and they've got like that little recess in them. You know, here in the Midwest, we play in the mud. I just feel like that would get mud packed in it and it would be pretty much almost impossible to get cleaned out very well, and I would just end up, when you put the needle in there, you'd end up just jamming a little bit of dirt in there and then forcing it in. I'm thinking I'm either just going to run these obviously while I'm wheeling it and then put the regular grease fitting on it. Well, there it is. Put the regular grease fitting on it when I, service the U-joints. That's exactly the same thing I do with the long fields on that. And I might even tack weld that shut on this one just to make sure it somehow doesn't get mud forced into it while I'm wheeling. Obviously you can't run the normal grease fitting on it because it will not clear the knuckle. You wouldn't be able to install the axle shaft and it wouldn't have enough room to turn because the ball joint would just shear that off. So yeah, you got to go in and change that. Every time you want to grease those U-joints, you got to turn it a quarter, jack it up, turn it a quarter of a turn, pull the plug out, put the zert in, put the grease in, take the zert back out, put the plug back in, turn it a quarter turn, and redo it all. But it sounds tedious, and it kind of is, but I don't mind it at all. It's peace of mind that I know I'm getting grease in each cap. All right, let's show the process of how I grease these. Not that it's rocket surgery or anything. Pull the little plug out of there. Put in the don't know that it really has to be snug, but I use synthetic moly grease in these, and it's always worked great for me. Oh yeah. Yep. Anyway, she's greased now. And I know it's greased, and I feel good about it. The needle, I don't think I'm gonna weld these shut. I think they'll be just fine like they are. And take some sort of weird freak accident. When you turn it 90 degrees to get to the next fitting, it doesn't stick straight out. So you have to bring it down enough to clear the brake caliper. Other than that, it's the same process. It's just a little harder to see. Okay, so now, after putting those in and going for a little test spin here on the property, at first they were nice and quiet. And the more I played, the popping came back. Didn't seem to be nearly as bad as before, but it was still there. Popping. Because the locker had been good in my previous disassembly in the spring, and now I knew I had good U-joints, the only other option I could figure was maybe the lockouts, but that just didn't seem likely. If you had a lockout that's been popping and banging like that for a couple of years, it's going to be chewed up. You're going to know it. That hub's going to be full of metal debris. The lockout's just going to be chewed all to hell. And they weren't, because I just had them apart putting the U-joints in. But I decided to go ahead and put in some full-time drive pucks. Here's a little video of that. Give it a tackle. Okay, so instantly after putting in the drive pucks, popping's still there. Not surprising to me at all, but I had to try something. Oh well, I figured it was back to the locker, whatever. Even though it all looked good, measured good, I did go ahead and order a DIN 44 mini spool, but I did not have time to put it in before our last wheeling outing a couple of weeks ago. So I wasn't driving it. My sister and her husband were driving this. I was driving my big buggy, and I wanted to get footage of the spiked tires here. And like instantly, within 10, 20 minutes of wheeling, the front passenger side axle broke. And while tearing this apart to fix it, I found something really, really interesting that at this point, I don't have it back together yet. So we're going forward from this point. But what I found, it makes total sense to me why the locker was popping and banging. Yep. But yeah, I'll show you what I found. Okay, you can kind of see I did this last night. I've already kind of done the repair. What was going on here, when I tore this thing apart, I noticed it was leaking a little bit of gear oil right here. And I thought, well, that's odd. I might just have to weld that up to seal that up. And then I got to thinking, well, it's surely not broke. I couldn't see. I wire brushed it all off, and I couldn't see where the casting was split anywhere. It just had that a real slow leak there. And my thought was, yeah, the casting was busted, something. But no, So what was going on is because the tube was not straight in the casting, the axle shaft was actually cocking the engagement gear that was inside the locker, causing the locker to not engage properly. I went ahead last night. I didn't have my camera out here with me. It was raining and miserable, and I didn't feel like going up to the house to get it, and I just went ahead and did this. Welded pretty good. You didn't miss much for video there. All I did is I spent some time with the grinder cleaning everything up, and then I heated it up with a torch to burn off any gear oil out of there. Welded pretty nice. I put a lot of weld on it. I know the bottom doesn't look great, but the first couple passes on the bottom welded okay, but for some reason it got worse after that, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Before I welded it, when I welded it, I still had the carrier and everything in there, but in the position I had it in right before I welded it, yeah, I could slip the axle shaft in there no problem. Slipped in nice and slick. Now whether it's actually straight or not now, who knows. Once I put it back together and try it, I'm hoping that it'll all line up and the locker will function properly again. It may not. I can't imagine that I made it worse, but I might have. Maybe it ain't straight enough. Maybe the locker will keep messing up. But at any rate, that needed to be welded because it was definitely loose. And today I'm going to go in here and a little light on the subject. I'm going to go in here and clean. Looks to me like here's the casting right here, and here's the actual axle tube. I'm going to go in there with the Dremel tool, clean all that up, and I'm going to put a bead of weld around in there. I can't get too crazy with the weld because this area right here, that's where the seal rides. So I don't want to get the weld clear down into that. So it'll be a fairly small, tight bead that I'll just put in there. There she is, cleaned up reasonably well. Kind of hard to get in there with that Dremel, but I'll do what I can. As you can see, I kind of cleaned up the seal area too. It's all heated up. I don't know if you see the smoke coming off it. But, and yes, I am aware that that pinion gear is kind of knackered, as the British would say. I'm just going to run it till it fails. Okay, there it is, all welded, and yeah, I got a little crazy with the weld. I put a couple of beads in and it encroached into my seal area. So I had to get in there with the die grinder and clean that up. And it also got into this area where the bearing race seats. So I had to clean that up a little. Looks absolutely awful. And yeah, welding this part here was kind of a bear because you can't really even see in there. But had to do quite a bit of grinding on that just based on feel. Steve! Buddy, how you doing? Yeah, Steve likes that. Well, it's time to find out the results. See if that front end is going to work now without popping or not. You ever have one of those occasions where you kind of want and need to know the answer of something you've done, but at the same time you don't want to know? Yeah, that's what I'm dealing with here. I had to do something though. Let's go find out. Power steering pump's growling terrible. Punch some holes in this now. Oh no, there it is, it's popping. Damn it! Suzuki LJ20. Yeah, bang bang pop. gonna sting. Didn't expect that kind of drop. This is where I'll break that stock axle. So the rig has been sitting like this all winter with the front end tore apart. It is late April right now, and we've got wheeling to do at the end of May for Memorial Day weekend. So it's time to get back to work on this. Let me show you what I got going on. All right, so let's see if I can adequately convey my thoughts on this without prattling on for too long. Here's the old Lockrite. As I said before, it served me well. I can't really complain with all the years of use I got out of it. The teeth really don't look bad, but you can see they are shiny and polished. So there is some wear going on there apparently. I had the thought to, okay, as you can see, this spot here where the cross pin goes, it is tapered like that. And the effect of that, to my understanding, is when the torque comes through the cross pin, it actually, because of that slightly ramped area, it forces this driver into this side gear, for lack of better terminology. I considered, and I still might do this in the future, redoing this and giving it more angle, or I guess it would be less angle. But actually the effect of that would be, instead of it, kind of meeting a dead end right there and only pushing so much, by making more of a taper here, it would allow that to really, jam in there right up that ramp and drive these things two together and get them to grip better. The problem with that is, there's two problems. I don't have a way to accurately make all of these the same amount, because there'd be, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 of them to do. So if I didn't get them all the same, I'm thinking it probably wouldn't work, or it wouldn't work for very long before something would self-destruct, possibly. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it in the future on something else. And another thing is, I'm getting sick of tearing this front end apart and putting it back together. So I'm done with this for now, but it might come back out. I'm saving everything. I might try this again someday if I can figure out a way to accurately give these the same amount of removal. But for now, I decided to go ahead and try a Torq Locker. And as you can see, compared to the old locker, the teeth are nice and fairly crisp on this. So yeah, mostly just in the interest of getting tired of taking this damn front end apart and putting it back together, I just spent the money, got a new one. We're going to go with that. Okay, so this Torq Locker, there's quite a few less parts to it, so it should be simpler, less stuff to go wrong. You basically only got 4 main parts here and 2 springs. That's kind of what I liked about it. Should be pretty easy to set up. I didn't even read the instructions yet. We'll just see if I can figure this out based on past experience with the other locker. I'm assuming it doesn't make a difference which side it goes in. Smash my fingers and everything else. Alright, I'm just going to drop back and read the instructions real quick. Take my man card from me, I guess. Looks to me, if you want to put it in this way, with these facing up. I'm supposed to coat these with grease to hold everything in place, but yeah, that just makes things too easy. Looking good, looking good. Okay, all the major parts are in. I started to get the springs in. That was very simple. Oops, got a little dirty. Got a little dirty. Cat, what are you doing over there? At least put it in there enough to keep things held in place. Find a way to wedge that apart. Come on. There. One. It's supposed to be between 0.145 and 175. Get out my calipers here, put the battery in. Keep my caliper stored inside in my safe. And I take the battery out of it because somehow, inevitably, it ends up turning itself on and running the battery down. I have 0.1475. Yay, we've accomplished something today. Thanks for your help, everyone. So I figured, seeing as how I was into it this deep, I just as well replace that ring and pinion. As you may recall, that was the pinion gear was getting a little chewed up. Well, we're going to see how my first gear pattern check goes today. Here's something I've been wanting to do for a while, instead of spinning the damn pinion by hand. So I went to the hardware store, and right next to the extensions they had this 1/2-inch speed handle. Now, it was a couple dollars more than an extension, but yeah, because this is, well, I guess I didn't measure that, but that's small enough that it actually fits in the drill. So yeah, it was worth that couple dollars more just for the time it saved me. I did grind some flat spots into that to give the chuck jaws something to grab, but let's see how it works. Works pretty good. Looks like I got a little shim work to do. I'll have to consult my chart, see what I need to do. Okay, so I finally got the ring and pinion set up after many frustrating attempts. I hate doing ring and pinions enough that I sure as hell wasn't going to record it while I was doing it. It's bad enough I have to do it. Anyway, this is the pattern I usually go for. Competition contact, where the pattern is down low in the pinion or ring gear. I'm assuming why this is okay is because, and like I said, this is just an assumption on my part, that when you really put it under load, that contact pattern is going to climb up the tooth. The only thing I'm not happy about is my backlash is a little on the tight side, but I guess I'll take what I can get. I do need a U-joint here, and this isn't the broken axle shaft, but I've got one of these, the stub shaft that I need to replace. I got all the parts to do that. And plus, when I took everything apart early in the winter, I was dumb enough that I just let it all sit out in the open. So all winter it collected dust and all the wheel bearing grease and everything. And yeah, right there's all where I do a lot of my fabricating and grinding. So yeah, it was just collecting up a bunch of filth in there. Yesterday I had some time, so I took everything apart and all scrubbed everything up and be ready for some new fresh grease. But should find out here in the next couple days whether the noise is finally gone. So I managed to get this side together. Got the diff cover on, the tire rod on, filled with gear oil. I had to go to town today and get an O-ring for this side, and unfortunately when this stub shaft broke last fall and it got wheeled for the rest of the day, it just absolutely beat the hell out of the fittings that were in there. Let's see if I can show you one. Yeah, luckily they came out pretty easy with a pair of pliers, but yeah, you couldn't get on them with a tiny socket. So I've got these little bolts that are cut short. They're just flush with the inside of the cap, and I think they should clear, even though they do stick up a little higher. But I guess if they don't clear, I'll have to pull it back out and do a little gentle grinding on it. Well, folks, I'm getting close to going on my first test drive, but this drive shaft here needed U-joints in both ends. And having to put that U-joints in, it kind of reminded me of a modification I did years ago when I first built this that some of you might find interesting. If you know early Broncos, this is actually an early Bronco drive shaft here. I believe it's a front one, maybe not, I don't know. I took it out of my stash. Anyway, when you're trying to get a lot of suspension flex and travel out of these, this is your limiting factor right here in this double joint. As you can see, that's not a terrible amount of angular flex there. At one point I tried in the past when I was playing with early Broncos a lot to just build a drive shaft that just had a single U-joint in it. But the problem with that, you didn't really gain anything, and if my memory serves me right, I think you actually lost a little bit. The problem is these fairly small U-joints that are in here. And when you have a small U-joint, you have a small yoke, and a small yoke means things start crashing into each other a lot quicker than with a bigger, more open yoke. Like I said, I tried it with the single joint and I didn't gain anything. So here's what I did do. This is the drive shaft I eventually... Not Steve, you're getting in my way, please go away. This is actually a joint from a front Dana 44 front axle shaft. As you can see, as I will demonstrate, it has a lot of travel. So what I did for the drive shaft, obviously I took this side of a shaft, made it fit into the tube. This side of a shaft, I basically made a plate, hole saw, stuck it in there, welded it. You know, those were a lot of work, but the real work came to make the yoke for the Bronco Dana 20. This is a spare one I apparently already made. What I did, this is not a Bronco Dana 20 yoke, I don't have one out, but basically I chopped it off right here, and as you can see, you'd have some sort of an oddball star pattern, not really star, I don't know what you would call that, but you've got these two nubs here. And then I cut this plate out. Sorry about that, folks. I'm trying to keep the cat away and just concentrate on what I'm doing. Not Steve, you're being a pain in my butt. All right, let me get up here. There we go. So, after I cut that yoke down, which I already showed you, you've got about this much of it. And it's a really odd pattern. So basically I took this plate and I just kind of roughly torched it out into the pattern that I needed and got a real kind of rough, crude fit, and then welded it in. It's welded on the back side too. I did the best I could trying to get it straight when I put it together, but even so you're not going to get it perfectly straight. And then I put it in my crappy old lathe over there and turned it down and made it flat this way. It's been so long ago I don't remember at what point I put the bolt pattern in it. But I don't think this one's been turned down because it sure don't look like these grind marks have been turned out of there. So maybe this is a rough one that I never finished. I don't know, it looks kind of fairly straight by my calibrated eyeball. But anyway, yeah, a nice benefit to doing this other than the travel is these U-joints are engineered to take way more torque than it should ever see at the transfer case. because these are down the axle, so they get multiplied another, what, 3.5, 4 times. This one wasn't bad, but I noticed it had a little sticking going on. It's been in there for years, so yeah, it's probably got some moisture in it. I didn't really look at it when I pulled the joint out, but I'm going to shut up now and get that U-joint in there. New U-joint, looking all clean and fancy. Waiting on this one to be delivered. In the meantime, I did discover that the bolt heads that I'd put in this U-joint cap, they were just rubbing the bottom ball joint. So I did a little work on them with the grinder. All better now. I think while I'm waiting for that U-joint to get here, I'll go ahead and service the rest of the vehicle. Wanted to go wheeling this weekend. So here's what the whole mess looks like put together, in case you're having trouble envisioning how it all worked. Yeah, I know, transfer case needs some seals in it. Alright, it's finally together. Let's take her out for a test run. Raining a little bit out there. As you may have remembered in the video earlier, which was last fall, the power steering pump was howling pretty good. I was going to put a Saginaw pump on it that I got off a van at the junkyard, but I realized I had another truck out here that had that same pump on it, so I went ahead and put that on. Otherwise the Saginaw pump, while a good move, would have required new hoses and a belt and all that, so just in order to save some time and a couple bucks, I put that on, and it seems to be, let's see here, it's quiet compared to the old one. I don't think it has quite the output, because it's not, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's still got some air in it yet. Anyway, let's take our first spin. I don't know if it's showing up, but I'm getting pretty wet out here. Quiet so far. Yeah, my loader's broke down. Blew a hydraulic hose on it. Another Super Duty chassis for a project. There's a big hole around here somewhere, see if I can fall into it. Bronco parts. Got the campground all mowed up. Mercury Comet, 1965. Couple of Torinos. Got plans for those in the future, hopefully. Big little kickback through the steering for some reason. pump was off of a V6 two-wheel drive half-ton truck, so maybe it's valved a little differently. The last pump was off of a Expedition, a 2001 Expedition, if I remember right. It's not doing too bad. Yeah, I'll definitely do the Saginaw pump in the future. Not enough time to do it right now. Whoa, tipping pretty good here. There's the real test. Tree branch tried taking my carburetor off. Let's see how it does on rocks. Okay, one rock. Well, there it is, finally success. It was a long journey getting there and kind of an expensive one. Guess I should have went with my first hunch that it was the locker. I guess really it probably needed those U-joints changed anyway. They were getting pretty sloppy. Power steering pump, yeah, I'll get that Saginaw put on it someday, but there's not enough time to get it done this time because I need to get this thing ready to go. While I didn't break anything on it last time I wheeled it, still got to go through it, check the fluids, grease everything up, and check it over and make sure there isn't some issue that I'm not aware of. I know the power steering pump on it's getting kind of weak, but it's been that way for a couple of years now, and there is an exhaust leak. I might have to look into that. But just gonna leave this thing out in the rain. It's supposed to rain pretty much for the next couple of days. Maybe wash some of that mud off it and take her wheeling this weekend. I'll get some footage, and hopefully the footage will be better than the last two times. If you've watched my videos, you might recall the first time I didn't even get any footage because I had a flat tire, and then the second time it broke an axle shaft right off. And while they did continue to wheel it all day with, the front end not working properly, you couldn't really tell the true potential of the tires anyways. Obviously this video has taken, over right at a year to do. Once I first started seriously diagnosing what that popping was in the front end as it became an issue. Those of you might have noticed that there's still some footage of Steve in it. It's because, he's not back from the dead, unfortunately. It's just because this video took such a long time to bring to fruition. Editing the video kind of makes me, it makes me really miss that little bastard. Anyway, go out there and find you a project, have some fun.